Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Anne Marie White, and she's going to tell us about her near-death experience. Hi, Anne.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I feel very grateful to share my story and to touch anyone who's listening and curious about death and life.
Okay. Go ahead and get started.
Okay. Well, let me take just a second here. You know, it's really hard to describe, even as many times as I've shared it, lived it, written about it. It's so hard to describe a near-death experience, but I'm going to give it the best I can. There was so much to my near-death, previous, during, and after. So I'll just give you a little bit about what happened the day of. The elements that kind of, were there, emotional. My background, I had been adopted several times in and out of foster homes. So my childhood was, pretty traumatic in a lot of different ways. On the day of my near death, I had been, my girlfriend had came over and gave me a newspaper article about how my parents, my biological parents, had to register with the state. At that time, a new law had passed, and I had, I was 50 years old at the time. So it was a little overwhelming to me to think
that just for your state, do you think?
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. At that time, that just felt really overwhelming to me to all of a sudden have everybody like show up and say, hey, I'm your family, when, I had been 50 years without anyone. So that was, going on. And as we sat down and started talking about my childhood, I just started having chest pains. My chest just felt like it was popping out of my heart just felt like it was popping out of my chest. There was a big truck sitting on it. I was sweating, all of a sudden, cold, hot. I had to lay down on the floor. My girlfriend, who was with me at the time in my apartment, was a nurse's assistant at an assisted living. Her father had died of a heart attack in her arms. I had no idea what was really going on. I just knew that I felt like I was hyperventilating. So I knew a lot of, emotions were coming up. I did not realize I was having a heart attack at the time. She did. She knew that it was on its way. So I laid down on the floor. And all of a sudden, I went to go reach for her and I was paralyzed. And all of a sudden I was inside my body, outside my body. I was both at the same time. And I found it very curious, like, what's going on? Am I delusional, hallucinating? As she's going to get blankets to cover me up, she puts my feet up. I'm freaking out because I can't move. And I know something's going on, that I'm not in control anymore. And as I'm being curious with what is going on inside, outside of me, I start just experiencing this wave of bliss, this bliss that just came over me and kept coming over me in waves and waves. And as she's talking, I'm still able to talk somewhat, and I can hear her. But I'm like, wait a minute, this wave of bliss, I'm going in and out of consciousness where I can hear, then I can't hear. But I'm experiencing everything at the same time. And this bliss is just flooding through me. And it's the most amazing feeling. I mean, I've done years of meditation and never experienced anything like it. And I was really curious, like, what is that? Is that me? Is that God? What is this? And so as everything was unfolding, I was also freaking out a little bit because I was outside my body. And then I would go back inside and I could feel the pain. I was out of the pain. So I was going in and out of consciousness as she's upset. She's, freaking out. I can feel everything so intensely as she's freaking out, getting upset. And she wanted to call the ambulance. And I remember saying to her, I heard a voice say, just lay there and take it. And I knew that if I didn't just lay there and take it, allow it to unfold, that I was probably having a heart attack. And at that point, I'm realizing something really is going wrong here. And she's wanting to call the squad. And I'm not a big fan of doctors. I do a lot of things naturally. And she was getting angry at me that I wouldn't let her call. And I just asked her, I said, look at me. Can you just look at me? At this point, I'm still able to talk. And there's an awareness of she's responding, so I know she can hear me. But at the same time, I'm not sure if the communication still seemed to be there at that moment. But then there's times when I wasn't sure. It was very strange when I look back on it, but she was responding. But I asked her to look at me in the face as her friend, as my friend. Would you please just give me my wish? If this was my last dying wish, would you please not call the emergency squad? And can you just understand that neither of us understand what's really going on here, but I want to experience it. And she hesitantly, as she looked at me, said, yes. Okay. I could tell she didn't like it at all. And she began to call my boyfriend at the time to see if he would come. As this is going on, I'm going in and out. The bliss is washing over me so intensely. And I just want to surrender to it. At the same time, there's fear and doubt of what's going on. And it's so intense. And I hear her leave and she's yelling, saying she's got to go take her blood pressure medicine. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? You shouldn't even be here stressing yourself out like that. And I can feel all her energy and it's so intense. She just felt like she couldn't do anything for me. So she said, I'm going to go. She lived next door to me. I'm going to go home, take my blood pressure medicine. So she literally leaves me and goes, takes her blood pressure medicine. And I'm like a little kid that their parents have left. And I'm like, woohoo, she's gone, it's party time. And I could just feel the free spirit, like open up. And I was like, and then it went dark. It went black, it went dark. And then all of a sudden I started seeing, I call it dancing shadows, movements. I didn't see any faces. I saw movements and shadows of energy that were showing me this back and forth movement of this energy was moving back and forth, back and forth. And everything was very intuitive, there was knowing. It was telepathic. It was knowing the truth of something. That was the communication. So when I understood that this was energy moving back and forth, I was kind of shown a shadow of a face. And I knew that I had hurt this person when I was young, and I had hurt them. And all of a sudden, this back and forth energy, I can feel that I feel hurt. And I could feel that the giving and the receiving was the energy that we were exchanging. I had hurt someone and I was feeling their hurt and pain. In the meantime, I'm angry at them that they can feel that. And this was this was all given to me through this back and forth. It was as if this was a message. I received it, and I knew that it was, you hear about it on earth, but the way that I experienced it was, it's whatever I'm giving to this other person, I'm really giving to myself. And that is the giving and the receiving. I'm giving this person something, and it's on an energy level, and they're receiving it, and I'm receiving it back. And it's all energetic. I received that. I got this message, and it just seemed to flow into a different energy pattern of where I was immersed in like the universe and this blackness and all this, just I was shown this big vast universe, and I was it. I was everything. I was in it. I was surrounded. I was the whole thing. I was connected to it all. There wasn't nothing I wasn't. And I was shown this. So as these energies are moving, and they just kind of, it's like everything just unfolded. And so I was given five, I call them five wisdoms, basically. And this was kind of like my second one. It just kind of opened up, showed me the universe. I was the universe. I was everything in it. I was connected to it. I was not separate from it. And I was the awareness. I was the awareness that was the observer of it all. And I was surrounded, immersed in this black space. And I knew in this void, in the experience, that I felt I had everything. I was everything. I knew everything. There was nothing I was lacking. And everything was here now. And then I had this revelation that this is Jesus manifested miracles. It's the same space. And it was that state of perfection of I and the Father are one. That's what I experienced. And it was so intense. And I was this awareness, this ever-present now awareness, where my attention was always now. There was never anything other than right here, right now, other than distraction. But that's clearly what I saw. And then after I experienced this, there was more energy movement, shadows. I could feel this fear, this intensity. All of a sudden, there was this golden liquid love that just began to surround me, surrounded my body. I was immersed in it. After, it was like everything just unfolded as I got it, as I got the wisdom. And then the movement of energy would have another experience there. And this golden liquid love, I call it golden liquid love. It just immersed me. It surrounded me. It held me in all my fears, all of my doubt, everything I was feeling, anxiety. It just held me. And I was curious about it because I never really had a mother. I never really have felt love in my life, just my childhood and my background. And I was really curious about this. It was this golden liquid love energy that totally immersed itself around me, surrounded me, held me, and it just continued to hold me as I felt whatever I was feeling. And it held me, and I say I can imagine it would be like a mother holding their child, like when I would hold my son. It just held me, and it gave me the space just to experience whatever I was experiencing. And I knew it was going to hold me for as long as I needed it. And it did. It held me, and I could feel my emotions shift. And the longer it held me, the more peaceful I became. The more space was available for the peace and love that surrounded me. And the more peaceful I felt, the energy of love started flowing through me like a figure 8. And it started like going through my body. And it was still surrounding me, but it was immersing me. And it was so beautiful, and it was so loving. And I was like, is this God? What is this? Is this me? This love knew me intimately. It knew what I experienced, that it knew that I needed to be held and to embrace what I was experiencing in the moment. And it allowed me to experience whatever, all of my fears, everything I was experiencing, it just allowed me to experience it. And it held me until everything was resolved into love and peace. And there was a stillness. And then the energy moves again. And it shows me that I am the creator. It shows me a black screen, like a movie screen. And it shows me how I'm creating my life. And the things I'm putting on the screen are what my mind is creating. But the screen is black until we put something on it. And it began showing me this. And I thought it was so fascinating that I've heard we're creators of our life, but this really hit home with me. Like, I'm literally creating everything in my world. And it showed me through energy, shadows, memories of how I was creating, and that I was responsible for what was on the screen. I really was like, wow, okay, I seem to get that. And then there was a movie reel that appears, and I'm curious, like, what is this? There's a bunch of shadows dancing, moving, and it was entertaining. And I was like, wonder what's going on here. And what was so fascinating was the moment I would have a curious question, I would instantly get the answer. Telepathically, I knew what the answer was. And I was curious, like, why can't I do this on Earth? Why can't, somehow I knew that I wasn't, everything was happening simultaneously. And I'm like, why can't I do this on Earth? Why am I not getting answers like that? So as this dance and shadows are happening, I'm laying there going, wow, this is really cool. What is this? And all of a sudden, the movie screen stops because I asked, what is this? Now all of a sudden I see shadows of a woman and a baby on her hip, and it seemed to be a man. And I started asking questions. What am I seeing? Why am I seeing this? Who is this? Instantly, I get answers. This is you when you were 6 months old, when your mom gave you up for adoption. That's your mother, and that's somebody from Children's Services. And I was like, wow. I heard these loud screams of no, no. I heard the baby cries. I heard everybody was like in chaos. There was a lot of chaos there. I was like, what is going on here? And then I was presented with that was me. And I was like, wow. As I'm hearing all these loud screams and this no, this woman screaming, no, 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 it just hit me. I was like, I have been doing this my whole life, screaming no, not liking the way my life has been, not liking anything in my life from the time I was born to all of my adoptions. I've been screaming no inside my whole life. I've been fighting my whole life and screaming no. It was so powerful and so like, oh my gosh, I got it. Like that's me. I've been screaming no. So as I realized, I mean, I call it a revelation
Yeah, that's what I just wrote down, revelation.
I'm 50 years old and I just realized I have a revelation that I've been fighting inside of myself and with the whole world about how my life has been. And it was so powerful that I said, I wonder, like you become this curious, like I became curious about everything. And I was like, I wonder if I'd have said yes, if my life would have been different.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I was able to experience this. And as I asked that question, I got a definite knowing of yes, your life would have been totally different if you had said yes to everything instead of no. I heard a big crack. It just sounded like a big, I call it Dorothy clicking her heels inside my head. I heard this big click, this big loud click in my head. And all of a sudden, I am like, I can see my girlfriend coming back into my apartment or walking up to my door. I can see outside, inside. And all of a sudden, as I hear the click, I'm starting to like move and pat myself down and I'm freaking out. I'm back in my body. And I'm like, pat myself down. My girlfriend walks in. She's mad at me. She's still angry. And I said, oh my God, you gotta come over here. I gotta tell you. And I'm moving and I'm literally sitting up. And she's like, what happened? And I said, come here, I gotta tell you. Anyway, so that's how I actually came back to life. And it was just the craziest thing. But I did have a heart attack. I had went to the firehouse because I didn't want anybody messing with me. I felt like if it was my time, it was my time. And there was a reason for everything. I'm not a big fan of trying to save. I know that we're all going to die, and there's a reason and a purpose. And I wanted to know what that was. So I just let it unfold. And that was, that's how I felt. It was more like an intuitive feeling too. Like, and when I heard the voice, just lay there and take it, I knew that I needed to surrender. And the night right before, I had an intense dream. Right before my girlfriend came over to my house, I had a dream of Jesus on the cross, and I could feel his intense suffering as they are nailing a big railroad nail stake through crossing his legs and just drilling this thing through. And I'm just excruciating pain. And I wake up, I'm hysterically sobbing. I've never had such an intense dream like that ever. And I was hysterical. My boyfriend was there getting ready to go to work. And he's like, do you want me to stay? And I said, no. But I was so hysterical because I could not believe the vividness of this dream. It was like I was actually there. And I could feel the pain and the suffering, and I felt so much grief and sadness that human beings do this to other human beings. It just was so, oh, it was so intense. And so this was just, several hours. I would say my girlfriend came over about 12, and this was when I woke up, and that morning that I had this dream. So there were some things that had happened, right before, the night before. I didn't feel good. I was at a poker tournament, and I was having a lot of anxiety, and my chest was hurting. And told my boyfriend something wasn't, I just didn't feel good. And I was at a final table, which I'd been many times. So he's like, you're just, freaking out because you're at the final table, which is a big deal in poker. Nah. So those were kind of the things that, had happened the night before.
Did the fire department take you on to the hospital?
No, I had a feeling that, no, they asked me if I wanted them to, and I said, no, I declined. So I let my girlfriend take me to the fire department because I had been told that if we go to the fire department, that it'd be a lot easier and that they would, ask me that if I voluntarily wanted to go. And they could tell that I had had a heart attack, but they said that my levels were normal and my heart rate seemed normal.
How could they tell?
They did EKGs and stuff on me.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
You haven't had a heart attack since?
No.
How long ago was that?
2015, March. Yeah, I haven't had any issues. No. But my girlfriend could verify that I definitely had a heart attack.
So did you get to meet your biological family then?
No, nobody stepped up. I did one time meet my biological father, in my 30s, one-time deal. That's a whole nother amazing story, but he was older. And so, yeah, I would think that there wasn't a whole lot of people still, alive or aware. Actually, when I met my biological father, my mother had given me up at 6 months old. So when I saw that, I already knew that. That was one of the things
he told you that when you met him?
Yes. And that's one of the things he had told me, which was interesting.
Did he say why the children's nurses took you from her?
Well, actually, they were in the military, and back in 65, they weren't married. He was in the military, met her in Italy, and they came back to Columbus, Ohio to have me. And he was on leave, and he would come home every day and see me, he told me. And then one day he came home and I wasn't there. And he said, well, where's Lisa Ann? And my name had been changed. And she said, this is what he says. I couldn't stand her anymore. I took her to Children's Services. Well, they weren't married at the time. So
your mother said that?
Yes. That's what my father had told me that my mother had said. And
so maybe that wasn't true, huh?
I'm not sure, and I'll never know. There's things that I have to accept that I'll never know.
You were shown that, right? Your experience.
I was, yes.
That she was screaming, no.
Yes. So what did you just say?
You said your mother was screaming no.
Yes.
Experience. But your father says that she didn't want you.
Yes. I always wondered why she was screaming no, almost like, but there was only three people that I saw, as far as
I took it as no, don't take her. So I don't know when you said it. I don't know.
Right. And that's the way it felt too. So, but that's his version. That's what he told me. But yeah, I heard screams of no from her, like don't take, and then I heard the baby screaming and crying. There was a lot of chaos there.
So she was in another country when this happened, or?
No,
Okay,
no.
that was here.
Yes, that was in Ohio.
So are you able to get the records of who she is?
I don't know. I pretty much, I used to, when I was younger, yearn to know that. But I pretty much gave up on it. He tells me, I asked him about her, but he had Alzheimer's. And at the time I found him, he was what they call on. He was okay. So I asked him about my mother, and he said, you wouldn't want to know her. I said, well, that's not for you to tell me. I have curious questions about her, you know. You wouldn't want to know her. So that's all I got from him. When I asked my adopted father pretty recently, he said that he thought that she had died either on an overdose or suicide after I was, given away. So there's conflicting stories. That's the thing about when there's adoption at my age, and everything was closed. You have nothing to go on.
How did you find your father?
I really want to know that story. It was really an unbelievable story. So my son at the time is little, and his grandma she knew my story. She kept giving my son, and she would have him on the weekends, and she would give him, I would say he was about 6, 7. She would give him a little note, and it would have a phone number. And he would come home on the weekends and hand it to me. And he says, Grandma says you need to call this number. And he would give it to me every weekend. And I'm like, I would throw it in the trash because I'm like, I don't know what this number's for. And, I just would throw it in the trash. And my son would say, did you call that number? No. Well, I didn't know what it was. And his grandma and I really weren't, we weren't close where we could really talk about it. But for some reason, she kept giving this number to him. I would say probably, at least 4 weeks, okay, this number would come. And it said USA search or something like that. And I just had, I kind of had a feeling of what it was about, but I wasn't really interested at the time. My boyfriend at the time, we're watching TV one night, and this USA search, find anyone, anywhere, at any time, or your money back guarantee. And my boyfriend says, I think you should call that number and find your parents. And at the time I was frustrated. I had already looked. I didn't want to pay $500 for, whatever. And I was like, no. And he goes, you get on that phone, I'm going to pay for it. It's a money back guarantee. If you don't find your family, then I'll get my money back. So he put up the money. I called, and my father, they had separate names because they weren't married. I had found out, I think, from a Reunite, and it's an organization for adoptees who, they'll go and research a few things. And I had found out a couple of things through that organization. And one of them was what my father's name was. And I just lost what his name was, but it was a very unique name back in the day. It was a common name back then, but it was unique to me. Holbert Thompson. Okay, Holbert, Hobert. So Thompson was a very familiar name. So I had given USA Search this name, and so Thompson's a very popular name. And I'm thinking, they're not going to have anything. I told them, gave them my birthday, my name. My name had been changed about when I was 5 years old. So I had given them both names. So within a week, I get a big envelope in the mail of one of those computer sheet printouts. I got it spread out all over my condo. Instinctively, it was the craziest thing ever. There was a lot of Hobart Thompsons in Ohio. Now, I had looked for them before and I couldn't find them. I went to the Historical Society. I did find my birth record, but there was no Hobart Thompson that had anything to do with me around. So I thought, well, he's still overseas or something. At this time, when I get the computer sheet printouts, there's a lot of Hobart Thompsons in Columbus, Ohio. I can't describe, as I'm opening up all these computer sheets, the best way to describe it is one of them jumped out. And they just give you addresses. They don't give you phone numbers. You're supposed to write a letter and say, hey, this is, I might possibly be your, child, whatever. I find this address and it just is like grabbing my attention, and I circle it. And I'm getting ready to take my son to karate class, and he's asking me what's going on. And this address is just like, kind of like, go there. So I go get my son out of karate school, and I literally go get a map, and I'm just going to go find this house.
Did you live in Ohio then?
I did. And I still do. But my boyfriend said, Anne, I wouldn't do that if I were you. I said, I'm going. Like, I'm the type of person. I've got this close. I'm going. I've got to find out for myself. I'm not going to send a letter and let somebody ignore me or say that, no, I'm going to go find out for myself. And so that's how strong this was, this intuition. And I mean, we're talking hundreds of Hobart Thompsons. And so I go on this goose chase. It looks like a goose chase. So there's a lot. It's just a dynamite story. And I met the man one time, and it was my father.
So do you knock on the door and he comes to the door and you say,
okay, so we're driving around trying to find this address. And back then I was in my 30s and I'm 57 now. So it's quite a while. It was still back when you had to use a map to find your way around. So I'm in the ghetto and I'm getting nervous, and I'm driving a Miata, and and I got my son with me. It's just me and him in this little sports car. And I'm really getting a little nervous. It's starting to get dusk time, and I'm trying to find this address, and I can't find it. So I tell my son, come on, we're going to have to get out and walk, because I figured it was probably on a back alley or something.
you're determined.
Oh my God. I was like, this address. Okay. So we're getting out walking around, and like I said, it's in the ghetto, and there's these people sitting out on this porch, this big old rickety porch. And this lady, she looks like she's the neighborhood watchdog. She goes, honey, you look like you're looking for something. Well, how can I help you? And I said, well, I'm looking for Hobart Thompson. And she goes, what do you want with him? And I'm like, I feel like I'm answering to somebody who's poking their nose in my business, right? And it's like, well, I might be his daughter. And she said, you sure as hell look just like him. And I just had chills that ran down my spine. I just knew I found the right house. And she said, the reason why you're not finding it is because it's down the alley in back of the other house. And that's exactly what I felt like. I was missing something. So I go to the house, and I mean, the porch is so rickety, I thought I was going to cave in on it. Beer cans all over the porch. And, oh my God, it was such a story. So I'm this far. I go knock on the door. I've got my son in tow, by the way. So he's standing there as quiet as could be. I've never heard him be so quiet, watching everything. And as I knock on the door, this woman comes to the door and she's like, "Are you from the something center or someplace?" And she's yelling at me, and I said, "No." It's like she can't hear, and she's an older woman. I said, "No, I'm not from family services or whatever." And she said, "Well, who are you then?" And I said, "Does Holbert Thompson live here?" And she said, "Well, who are you?" I said, "Well, I may be his daughter." And she said, "Nope, he doesn't have a daughter." And I said, "Well," she goes, "Nope, doesn't have a daughter." I said, "I'll tell you what." I said, "You go get him, and I'm not leaving until I know." And so she's kind of frustrated. She turns around, leaves the door, and she comes back in a few minutes and she says, "Well, I guess he did have a daughter in 1965. Come on in."
Oh,
So it was one of those moments that you yearned for all your life. I've never seen anybody who really looked like me until I had my son. So it was one of those moments that was very precious. And just getting to it was pretty amazing in itself. So I'm in this house that just reeks of urine. There's like this big old motorcycle gang in the corner. They're smoking weed, they're drinking, cussing, they got knives and guns out. The house is all dark. I mean, it's really creepy. And I'm just like, what am I getting myself and dragging my son into here, right?
yeah.
It's all just urine infested, and they're leading me up the stairway with all this urine, and it's dark. I can't see anything, and I feel like I'm going to see the wizard or something. Like, as I get to the top of the staircase, me and my son are standing outside this little landing, and we're waiting for her to come and get us, because she goes into this door and she says, "Well, he has Alzheimer's. I got to go make sure he's okay and on right now before you go in." And so I'm like, whoa, this is, I was 30, so I wasn't really unsure what Alzheimer's meant. So I'm standing out there waiting, and as she comes out and she says, "Okay," I walk in, and here's this white-haired man, and we're just looking at each other, and we glance and just looking into each other's eyes, and we're both crying. And he says, "Lisa Ann, I haven't seen you since you were 6 months old. I knew that you'd come and find me." And we were both just bawling. We looked just alike. And it was amazing. And apparently the reason I hadn't found him is he was like some captain, sergeant, big in the military, and had been in the military all his life, and had just gotten a release. And so he had several different children by several different women, and the house that he was staying in was one of the daughters that had power of attorney over him. So that was a crazy experience, but I did see him one time, and I tried to see him after that, but Cookie was the name of the woman who answered the door. And then I had a stepsister that was her house, and they were all threatened by me, like I wanted his money or something.
Oh.
That's what it amounted to, right? So I never got to see him again. And so that I had kind of, it took me a while, but I had to kind of make peace with all that's just the way it was with me in my life. I was going to have to accept that. So that was in my 30s. If I go back and I look at my life before, there was a lot of things leading up. At 14, I had been suicidal all my life. So at 14, the parents that adopted me the last time had foster kids. Sometimes they'd have 12 kids in the family at one time. So I just felt like I was in an orphanage again. I just, ever since I can remember, I was a very unhappy child. I just felt so much misery and suffering. I'd see kids laughing and playing and having fun in life. And I was like, I was so miserable inside.
Always an outsider looking in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I always got made fun of, you know, 4 eyes, ugly girl, throwing spit, and they would always throw spit wads at me. I was just a very miserable little kid. And at 14, I thought about it for a while, but at 14, I was ready. And I said, I'm just done with this place. I'm out of here. I don't want to get another year older and suffer, because I just felt like I was suffering more and more and more every year I got older. So I
Was
said,
that
I'm
your
done.
third adoption?
Yeah.
What happened with the other two?
Well,
How old were you when you were adopted the first time?
Well, 6 months old.
Okay.
When my biological father had told me that when my mother gave me up because they weren't married, he had a friend go and adopt me.
Okay.
So that was my first adoption at 6 months old. That's his story. Okay. Which kind of aligns with the reunite, what they had told me.
How long were you in that home?
I'm not real sure.
Okay.
I've never really been told that, but apparently what happened, and my father had told me, was that my father had gone back overseas, and the people that adopted me were older couple, and they started having health issues, and so they gave me back. And so then somebody else had came and adopted me, and I have no knowledge of any of that. And then my current, you know, my last adopted family.
Oh.
Yeah. But at 14, I had just had it. I just didn't want to live on this earth anymore. I knew that I always would ask my friend, my neighbor, and say, I just feel like I have a hole in my heart. And I feel like I don't belong on this earth, and that I don't belong here. Like, home is not here.
Were these other kids in the home? Were they all adopted too?
No. They were foster kids. Now, my adopted family did end up, there was one other child in the home that was adopted. And then Kevin and myself. So yeah, there was 2 of us at that time.
So you didn't feel like that was a family. You felt like it was an orphanage.
Oh yeah. I never felt loved. I never felt connected. And very recently, a couple years ago, my adopted father, he had told me that he had realized, he's now 81, but he had told me that he had realized after having all these kids that I had what was called RAD, reactive attachment.
That's just what I was wondering. If that's what you had.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I was just about to say that.
Wow.
Reactive attachment disorder.
Okay. So my adopted father and I had been separated for about 20 years because he was very abusive. He was in the military and used his tactics on us kids. And when you're emotionally wounded, those tactics will destroy a child. And the other boy had committed suicide. Well, it's a lot to go into, and I'll spare all the details, but just a couple years ago, he had told me that one thing that he had learned of having all these kids, well, I was one of his first. You know, I was actually the second to get adopted, but I was one of his first. I was actually a foster kid before he chose to adopt me. But over the period of time, he told me just recently, probably a couple years ago, that I had what he called RAD. I'd never heard of it. but I always wondered why I just never felt connected to anyone. And I never felt loved. I never felt connected. And I just thought there was something wrong with me. Why is everyone else able to be happy and connect? And I was so disconnected. Well, when he started sharing this with me, I just was like, oh my God, that is me. Wow. Well, he had learned this over a, what, 45-year period of having hundreds of kids in his home. And he realized that was me. And he himself wondered why I was never able to connect. And when he told me what, this rad was, it was such a powerful moment for me because I knew that was me. So
where no one bonded with you as a baby, you didn't learn bonding.
Yes, and that's exactly what he described. He said, no one took care of you. They let you lay in your diapers. They didn't feed you when you cried. They just left you. And so that's actually how I've always, it's in my nervous system that I just always felt abandoned, left, not loved, and very disconnected. And he described how that happens. And it's when you're a baby that all that is going on. And that's why it's so important when a baby comes in, if they don't get held right away, they literally can die because they don't feel that connection.
And failure to thrive.
So,
that's what that's called. Babies can literally die, just like old people can. If they're not loved, they just die. They just choose to. Even a baby don't understand the words, what they're doing, but they can just will themselves to die. And that's one reason I call my book The Will of a Wildflower, because I wanted to bring out the attention to that will to live.
Yeah. And I asked my adopted dad, I said, because I felt so disconnected, I asked him one time when I was like 20, 21. And although there was a lot of abuse, at times we could talk. And so I asked him, why did you adopt me? Because I didn't feel like it was for love. And I had heard it was for money. So, but his answer surprised me. He said, I knew someone was in there. I saw the light in your eye. Even though I had hearing problems, I was labeled slow learner. I was still in diapers at 4. I didn't talk. So I had a hearing impediment. But
what age were you when he got you?
He got me about 4.
Okay.
So by 5, they adopted me. Yeah. But those are like some prime time years that I understand.
Damage was done.
Yeah. And
it wasn't going to
now
show
I'm
up till
able
later.
Yeah. And I'm able to see that now, that a lot of the abuse that I experienced was probably catapulted from earlier and just felt more intense to me. Although people can call it punishment, whatever word you want to put on it. But for me, it just felt different. So
you mean like if you got spanked or something like that, you mean you felt that's abuse and you?
Well, it was more than just spanked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was more than spanked.
Okay.
But yeah. So at 14, I pretty much was just done with life, and I wanted to go back home is how I would describe it to myself. I don't belong here. I want to go back home. And I always was curious about that. Well, where's home? Well, home's not here on earth. So home is where I came from. And I had this knowing inside that, I'm talking early on in my life, I had this knowing. And I always felt like this big old hole was in my heart. Like I just felt so empty and disconnected. So at 14, I finally had the courage and the will to exit this earth. And my dad always had guns. And one night, the night before, he was, kind of showing it off as a in the nightstand as a protection device. And as I'm looking at it, I'm looking at it as an out of here,
Device.
device, a resolution to get out of here. And I had saw it was loaded, and I knew nobody would be home the next day, and I was just tired of kids making fun of me. And I was just done suffering. So on the day I decided to do this, I live in Kentucky, and there's a big hill. Our house was down at the bottom of the hill. And I had made up my mind. I had made a decision that I was done living in this world. I was just out of here. The day that I got off the bus, and all I had to do was walk down this hill to get to the house. Nobody would be home. I was the oldest at the time. I was 13 and a half, 14. And all I had to do was walk down this hill, probably half mile. And as I'm walking, I observe how quiet my mind is. And I thought it was really curious that it felt so peaceful to be going home to die. And I thought, this must be the right and perfect thing to do. So, okay. I was so at peace with dying. So I just kept walking, one foot in front of the other. And I could hear, it was so dead silent in my head that it was like the quietest I'd ever heard. It was so amazing and peaceful as I'm putting one foot in front of the other. And I go into the house, I get the gun, I go in my bedroom, and I remember thinking, what would happen when they come home? They won't care. They don't love me. And I have the gun to my head, and I'm getting ready to pull the trigger, and I hear a voice. And the voice said, today's not your day. I have big plans for you. And I'm not going to tell the rest of it, but it was basically what was going to unfold in my life. Now, this is a young girl, and I'm ready to die. So to hear this voice and explain the big plans it had for me was mine. I'm like, that's not me. That's not the Anne that was just getting ready to kill herself. So who is that?
What else?
That? Yeah. Who is that? What is that? Is that God? Is that me? Is that a different part of me? It felt like a telephone in my ear, but a soft voice. And at that time, I had been forced to go to church and was going to Baptist churches. And, I didn't understand God. I didn't understand it the way it was taught. I was very confused. But that day, I got a bird's eye view of what God was. And I just became curious. I couldn't tell anybody until many, many, many years later, that experience, because, I would have got a beating for that one too, getting the gun. So I decided to spare myself that, but I kept this to myself for a very long time. So basically, I hear the voice and I make a deal with the voice. And I say, okay, I'm serious. By next Thursday, it was on a Thursday, if my life doesn't get better, then I'm out of here. Plain and simple.
Thursday.
So I made a deal with the voice. I'm sorry, for some reason, there was a cutout there. I missed what you said.
Thursday. I just it just struck me funny. It has to be better by Thursday.
It's funny how, my little mind said, I'm next Thursday. You got till next Thursday. If my life's not, I was threatening the boys. If my life's not better by next Thursday, I'm out of here.
Now, this is the boys in the home, the foster kids.
This is the voice.
The voice. I thought you were saying the boys. Okay, the voice. You told the voice you have till Thursday.
Yes. 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 So strangely enough, as I'm down on my knees, I get myself together and I put the gun back. I'm shaken, like what just happened? Who was that? Was that God? There's nobody in the house. And I know this. And I'm like, who is that? It's like in my ear, inside of me, but it was soft, it was gentle, but firm. So I just began to kind of get curious, and I thought, maybe I can start having a conversation with this voice. And I kind of did. I started playing with it, and it seemed to be like my best friend. And out of the blue, amazing things happened that week. All of a sudden, the kids weren't throwing spit wads at me. People were asking me to babysit for them. My life started changing in dramatic ways in just that week. And so I decided to have a friendship with the voice, and decided to see if I could talk to the voice and have it talk back. And what would start happening was these intuitive, telepathic knowings that I would start having. And so I have written a little book called The Voice That Matters. And
Okay.
I had self-published it a while ago, but at the time when I had written it, there was nothing around, and a lot of the publishers had declined it because it wasn't mainstream, But so that's
Is it out there? Is it published? Like people can get it, or?
No, not at the time. Not this time. No.
Okay. All right.
I know that's
So
a lot.
have you continued to keep in contact with that voice?
Not at this time, because of my near death. The experience that I had was so intense that here's what happened after I came back. I felt all this love. Now, I couldn't work. I couldn't even hardly move after my experience of my heart attack. My chest hurt all the time. I was very fit, and I could hardly walk across the room. So I couldn't work. I lost my house. I lost my apartment. I came back with all this love. I felt all this love inside and around me. And my whole world, physical world, just fell apart. Everything. I lost everything. But
yet you felt all this love.
Yes, yes. This is the most amazing thing, the aftermath. I felt all this love, but I had lost every single thing I had. And it's just crazy. It was like everything was unfolding. I was being stripped away of all my physicality and I was so like, as years went on, the love started dwindling. And I was like, I would tell my son, something, the love is disappearing. Where's it going? So many things happened even after that just like a lot of people around me don't even have what happened to me in the last 4 years in a lifetime, it seems. And I'm like, what just happened? My son all of a sudden goes to prison on his own recognizance. I end up deathly sick with sepsis in the hospital. Just all these things started one after the other coming in succession after my heart attack. And it really made me question what is going on, and what is that love? How do I get back there? And my son made a comment to me one day. He said, Mom, you're just always trying to get back there. And somebody had asked me early on to explain it to them. And I had told this guy, I said, well, his son had died, and he asked me about my near death, and it felt comforting to him to know. And I said, well, that love is what we are. It's always here. It's always available. It always has been, but we're just not aware of it. We're always looking away from it. But it's always here. And that's what we're made of. It's what we are. Call it God, call it whatever you want to call it, but it's the creation of existence, the very fabric of everything. And I knew this. I knew it.
Is your son still incarcerated?
Yes. Yes.
See,
unfortunately.
When does he get out?
Well, hopefully soon.
Okay.
But yeah, that was very shocking. It was on his own recognizance. No, there was no case, no anything. I had always taught him to tell the truth. The truth will always come out. Just put it out there and let it, And at the same time, he was very fascinated by my near death, and all of everything that happens in our lives, it's just unfolding in the most perfect way that we need to come back to the truth of who and what we are. And even up to today.
You were told you have a purpose.
Yes. Yes.
Do you know what it is?
Yes. It's to share. I definitely know. I knew when I came back that it was to share the love that's already here, always available, just waiting for us to connect. And there are things that I call them distractions, memories, beliefs, the things of the mind that are identifications. Those are what I realized that I started accumulating. See, I was wiped clean when I died, basically. And that love held me. God, love, it held me until everything. I came back with a little bit, but I was mostly wiped clean. But what happened was I came back and started identifying with the body. And it's real easy to do. That's what we come here to play this, little part of, Anne. So I began to identify and create my life on the screen that I was shown of this Anne. And so it blocks the awareness of what we really are. And the more that we accumulate, the less that we can see, because we're focused our attention on some dream created reality.
You were recently married, right? You just had
Yes.
Is this your first marriage?
Oh goodness. Yes, it's my first. And it was amazing how this even happened. Oh, just so crazy amazing. The more that I just feel into and hold myself like the love held me, I've learned to hold myself and give myself that same space. And that's really what loving ourselves is giving us the space to feel and experience whatever is in front of us to experience. And, you can call it surrender, holding, giving space for things. And that's how the movement of the past, of the emotional energy, blockages, and everything has space to move. And just doing that for myself the last several years, miraculously, my husband shows up, and I'm 57 years old. I never thought in a million years, I've never lived with a man, never saw myself getting married, and yeah, pretty amazing.
How old is your son now?
I'm sorry, what you asked?
How old is your son?
He is 33. 33. And he has been on this ride with me, and it's very interesting because he was willing to listen, and he got a lot from my near-death experience that actually helped him in prison. And I just, curiously wonder, he will tell me to this day that he felt that he needed to go to prison. As devastating of a feeling as it is for a mother, and for him, I mean, he had a very supportive, loving life out here. To see how everything unfolds, and we're not in charge, it's just,
You two sound very close.
yes, we are. And he would cry and call me, and a bird doesn't bang his head up against a cage. It just goes and sits and bees in there until the door flies open and it's free. So you can either sit in there, bang your head up against the wall, or you can sit and experience life and what's going on inside of you. And he's actually in prison helping the other inmates emotionally. And I can see how the bigger picture has,
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's still at times, challenging, because, I never envisioned, it's not something I envisioned for myself or for my son, but as my adopted father would say, that's where God wants him. And that has helped me
Is he
a
close
lot.
enough you can visit?
Yes.
That's good.
Me and my husband are going to go visit him again. My husband met him, wanted to go meet him before we got married, and let him know that his mama was being taken care of. And because
Does your husband have other children?
he has a 20-year-old daughter, yes, and they're
So
kind of on the not speaking terms at the moment, but
girls at that age.
yeah. And he wasn't. There's a story behind that, but yeah. So I tell them,
wait till their 30s. Just don't worry about it till their 30s. We have 10
exactly.
girls.
Oh,
It
do you?
seems like their 20s, it was just like their adolescence all over again, only they're on their own. And when they got in their 30s, they start settling down finally.
Yeah. Right. I told him, I said, you know what? She's gonna need her daddy. At some point in time, she'll be back around. You can't force it. You just
Yeah,
have to
especially if
let
she
'em come.
gets pregnant.
Oh yeah. Oh
They
yeah.
tend to want their family.
Mhm. Yeah. That's a good place to come to.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing this. Is there anything else you wanted to say or leave us with?
I can't think of anything.
Okay.
Do you have any questions? Or?
I love the fact that you knew out of all those men, Herbert is his name? Herbert?
Hobart.
Hobart, of all those Hobarts, Thompson, that you knew which one it was and that you just went. I love that story. I just picture you going through that alley, all those drunks sitting in that house, and I could smell the pee in the house.
Oh, yeah. There was a lot more to that story too. That was pretty amazing. So I definitely haven't lived a boring life, and I'm gonna check out your book that you said, the will to, what was
The Will
book?
of a Wildflower. I could send it to you an email if you want it through email.
Oh, I would love that.
Okay.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. I believe that God takes a special interest in us orphans, whether we're actually orphans or we're just not loved in our families, abused, feeling alone. I really believe that God adopts us. I mean, I know we're all God's children, but I really feel that I've heard so many stories, and having my own, I really believe that God gives us a little leg up sometimes by having these experiences, near-death experiences, spiritual experiences, out of body, this little touch of heaven that will just give us a little parental guidance to get us through to the next stage of our lives.
Yes. That gave me chills when you said that.
That's what I believe.
Yes, I feel like it's ever evolving into whatever, it's like a flower, and whatever the flower needs to bloom and grow is what we're going to be given. And there's nothing like in my near death. There's nothing to fight. Just say yes and roll along with it. And life is a lot easier that way.
Yeah, that surrender thing that doesn't come so easy for us that have felt we had to take care of ourselves and cannot trust the world.
Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking this morning, I often come off really tough, like on Facebook, because that's like facing the world. It's not one person usually when you put a post out or when you're talking, it's like how you feel about the world. But then people get to know me one-on-one, like with having guests on or just anybody on the street. I'm a total different person. I'm very empathetic. I'm very compassionate. I'm very open to just like closeness. Like my arms are wide open. But when it comes to the world, it's like,
yeah.
So that saying yes, and then that surrender, that takes maybe till we're in our 50s. To learn.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And I will send you my book, and this should be ready tonight. And as soon as it's available, I'll send the video to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Peggy. It was a joy.
Bye-bye.